What's that? You heard me on TV? Didn't know the second. So, I wanted to ask you a question, and that's this. There are 11 people in your chapter of 36 that are missing today. How does that affect you as a chapter? And what can you do about it? Cuts down on the referrals, absolutely. What else does it cut down on? Out of sight, out of mind. So, in other words, it cuts down on the part of people hearing your ask and being able to say, hey, I know someone who might need your service. For example, Joe stood up and said, I wanted to meet, and he named off the name of a business, right? So they missed that part. And then, by the same token, the fact that they're not in front of you, as Lance said, he kind of forgets that, oh, maybe I should be out working referrals for you. So it's one thing that B&I has a sub policy, and I know a couple of your members said subs, and that's great. Subs are great, but they're not a substitute for the real thing. So the question then is, well, what do we do about it? How do we solve that problem? I mean, listen, we send out letters. We, after a number of absences, we just ask for leave because we figure you're not helping the chapter all that much. We send out letters, but at the end of the day, we can't force anyone to show up here, right? So how do we make it so that people want to be in this room every Thursday morning at 7 o'clock? How do we do that?
Make them feel welcome, tell them you miss them.
Make them feel welcome, tell them that you miss them. Very good.
I think we can try really, really hard to pass more referrals to one another, do more one-on-ones to make actually being here more valuable.
So we can make it more valuable, and you're right, but of course, if half the chapter is missing, it's very difficult for us to make it more valuable for them because they're actually missing it, right? So it's kind of a self-perpetuating situation. What else can we do? Very nice, CJ. What else can we do? Hold them more accountable. That goes back to the letters, but at the end of the day, what are we going to do, right?
Invite more.
Invite what?
Invite more guests.
Invite more guests. Tell me more about that.
I think it goes along with what CJ said. I think when there's more guests in the room, that creates more value to being here, and more people will be receiving your message.
I think you're right. I think by inviting more guests, it does exactly that. It makes it a more valuable meeting. You see, if I knew that there were going to be 15 people in the room, would I think twice about getting up in the morning? If I knew that I had an opportunity to meet 15 people in the room, would I might think twice about, well, I can reschedule that meeting for a little bit later? And the answer is, if you look at statistically how B&I grows, the answer is without a doubt. Now, there's an advantage to that as well. What's the other advantage to inviting more guests? They might join, yeah. And it's not so much they might join, because let's face it, only about 2% of the people who actually could be part of B&I join B&I, right? So it's not so much that they might join, it's that they see value in your organization. And by seeing value in your organization, they can take that next step and start building relationships. Whether or not they join or not doesn't really matter. Christine, let me ask you a quick question. If we had 5 realtors that showed up today, how would that change your business?
Potentially increase my business.
It would potentially increase your business. Even though they can't be part of B&I, it would potentially increase their business. I could ask the same question of Carol. If 5 new people showed up, how would that change your business? Yeah, see, so across the board, having those visitors are a huge advantage. Now, what does that have to do with what you're doing? Let me ask you this. When your leadership team said that you were going to have a visitor day, how many of you can admit this? How many people went, another set of postcards? How many people thought like that? Yeah, absolutely. And listen, I know there's a whole lot of people who aren't going to raise your hand. I get that too. But what I want you to think about is that B&I on a regular basis has what we call an extravaganza. Now, the extravaganza, I think we're now changing that to Remember, how many people thought about sending out those 40 letters and said, thank God we're not doing that this year? Yeah. My question is, why would that be a detriment? Is it a pain in the neck? Yeah, absolutely. And doing the same thing for your visitor day is going to be a pain in the neck too. What I want you to start thinking about though, is your visitor day being a payday. Making your visitor day a payday. Here's why. First of all, there is a lot of work. We know that. There's a lot of work that is involved. You've got to come up with 10 names. Ooh, that's really difficult. I mean, let's face it, if I look at my Rolodex, there's probably 1,000 people in my Rolodex, even though we don't really have Rolodexes, but my electronic Rolodex, right? There's probably 1,000 people. So how difficult is it coming up with 10 names? I mean, has anybody heard of something called a phone book? Believe it or not, it has more than 10 names. So, I mean, if you're looking for names, there's a number of sources out there just to get names if you're looking for it. What is that you're holding up?
Classified from the B.
There's classifieds. There's a number of different places you can get the names. So, obviously, the names can't be that much of a pain in the neck. It really can't, right? What's it take? 10 minutes? A minute a name? Okay, so, it's not that much of a pain in the neck. What's the pain in the neck part? The follow-up. Absolutely. The follow-up. And so what I want you to think about is that follow-up being your payday. It's not about the visitors, it's about you developing a relationship. So let me ask you this. If you were to pick up the phone and say, and I'm going to pick on Carol because she got that award that had my name on it. So I'm going to pick on Carol. But if Carol picked up the phone and said, Carol, I don't even know what company you're with. Straw. I thought you would change it, sorry. So I didn't know what you would call it company. If Carol picked up the phone and said, hey Sue, this is Carol from Straw Taylor, and I just wanted to let you know that I sent out a postcard inviting you to a networking event. What is the end result?
She at least knows Carol's name now.
She at least knows Carol's name now, which is it?
She made a contact.
She made a contact. She made a contact. Now, in this businesses that we're in, are contacts not exactly what we need to do? That's a payday. That is your opportunity to develop a relationship. What if that person, what if Susie that she just called says, Carol, thanks so much for calling me. I can't make it. What's the downside for Carol?
She loses nothing.
What's the downside? Matt says she loses nothing.
She wouldn't have met the person anyway if she didn't reach out to him.
She wouldn't have had an opportunity to meet that person. Now, because it's a payday, she has an opportunity to develop a relationship. Who knows when she calls that person and says, oh, you sell homes. Let me ask you a question. I was looking at a home a few months ago. Do you know if it's sold yet? There's a number of questions that can come up. But it will never come up if Carol doesn't look at making that phone call as what? A payday. So what I want you to think about as we go forward is that if you want to make your chapter successful, you've got to have people here. And the way you're going to get people here is really simply this: to look at your chapter as a payday. To look at inviting visitors to your chapter as a payday. All right? Now, let me tell you this chapter that does this very successfully. It's B&I Signature. Do you know B&I Signature has implemented the same process that you're implementing, except they have implemented it every other week. Every other week, they host a visitor day. Every other week, they're sending out postcards, whether it's to attorneys this week or realtors that week, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Let's talk about the results. They were a chapter of 23, they're a chapter of 33. What have they done over the last 3 months? They have added one new member to their chapter every week. One new member to their chapter every week. Now, that's not why they had a visitor day. Why were they having visitor days? Why were they having visitor days?
Because visitors.
Extra pay days. Very good. They were having visitor days, not because their director said, listen, you can't be in chapter 23 if you're going to be successful. No, they had visitor days because they wanted when they were a chapter of 23, now they're a chapter of 33 on average. Are averaging 6 visitors every week. Now you gotta look at your numbers and say, hey, are we doing that? All you have to do is start looking at it a little bit differently. Start looking at it as a payday. Start looking at it as an opportunity to pick up the phone and say, hey, by the way, every one of you, or just about every one of you today said, I want to meet this type of person. And yet, you got to ask yourself, did you pick up the phone and invite that type of person to your meeting? If you haven't, you're not looking at it as a payday. This is your payday. Who wants to get up in the morning? Who wants to send out those postcards? You don't want to do it unless, of course, you look at this as a payday. It's an opportunity for you to get where you want. So Visitor Day is about a payday. It's not about growing your chapter. Your chapter is at what, 37 right now? 36 right now? Something like that? Okay, that's almost a 40-minute chapter. That's, you're well over BNI's average. But think about the people that aren't here. They're missing out on a payday. And, by the way, you're missing out on a payday too, because they're not here. So think about your meeting differently. Think about inviting guests differently. Your guests are your payday. How many people want to skip payday?